welcome to the final class of the night. We are doing the Getting Started series using a vinyl cutter. Now, some of you have asked that we wait just a couple of minutes so people can get into the class. So I will just finish setting up around me, give you guys just a couple of minutes to come in, and then we will hop right to it. I have a very short PowerPoint because a lot of this is going to be hands-on using the Roland GS24. And then I also have a Cameo that I'm going to see if I can just get to work Wi-Fi. So hopefully everything will communicate just fine this evening. So on the other side is Jenna Sackett. So Jenna, if you start to see people commenting that they're in, let me know and we'll go ahead and get moving. If I pin myself, does that mean it stays on? There we go. Cool. All righty. Hello, hello. Guys, keep in mind that if you have any comments, make sure you post them in the Pathable link. It took us just a minute or two extra to get started this evening. So that's why some of you might have received an error, and that's just because I didn't hit the live button yet. So thank you guys again for tuning in to the last class of the night. Jenna, let me know if we're good to go. I know I said that already, but
yeah, it looks like everybody's in and good to go.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to look at the camera here, but if you see me glance to this side, just know that's where my PowerPoint is. So bear with me on that. Like I said, we are going to do just a quick PowerPoint to give you guys some information. I'll make sure that I turn around and post the PDF in the files once this class is done. And I have a feeling that there's going to be another file that you guys are going to want. So I'll probably post that one as well. Okay, let's go ahead and rock and roll with this PowerPoint. All right, like I said, guys, for the third time, this is the Getting Started class specifically for the vinyl cutter or a vinyl cutter. We will talk and touch on both a industrial and a craft. So before you are moving down which path you want to move forward with, maybe you already have a cutter and you're looking to see what or how the industrial cutter compares to a craft, or maybe you don't own a cutter at all and you're really just trying to figure out which one is going to be best for you at the beginning. So before you buy, understand the difference between the two. They're both going to fulfill the need on cutting vinyl, but really understand what you're doing with the vinyl cutter, who you're going after with the vinyl cutter, and then of course, where you're going to put the vinyl cutter. As you can see, yeah.
Real quick, are you able to switch your view to the play presentation view? It's coming up a little bit funky on the Pathable end.
Okay, so how do I do that? Because I could not figure it out with two monitors. Okay, we're gonna do this. Here, easy. We're gonna cut it. Oh, as I'm like leaning into the camera. Here. Okay, so we are going to X the PowerPoint, guys, and I'm just gonna review this information, and then I will turn around and I will post that PDF so you guys can have it on hand. Like I said, it's just going to be more of a tool. We're gonna go over a couple of things, so you will hear it like as I'm speaking, but if you want a physical presentation, you can download it and save it for yourself. Okay, so in terms of before you buy, just understanding the difference, we're going to put them, as you can see, they're two completely different sizes. This is the GS24 on this side, and then I have the Cameo Silhouette Cameo on this side. Parts, there are going to be more parts with the GS24 than there is the craft cutter, which we will go over that. And then of course, the programs that you will need for designing and then cutting your material. Lastly, we will go over how to cut with the GS24. And as long as we have time and I can get it to work, then I'll show you how the Cameo works. Okay, so for the craft cutter, which is this guy, as you can see, I can move him. He's very lightweight. For the Cameo 4, I can use a roll. I've never used it. I can sync it up by Bluetooth. That's how this little button right here is on. You can't really see that. But for a craft cutter, it's great for 1 to 5 pieces. Of course, you can produce a job with more than 5 pieces. You can produce a job as many quantities as you want. You just have to constantly use this little sheet in order to cut each individual logo. It's very portable. This closes forward. Everything is protected. You could go to events with it. You could move it from place to place in your house. You can travel with it. It's very affordable. There are several different versions. It's like probably a cell phone. A new one comes out every year and a half. And of course, depending on the brand, there are a whole bunch of different versions. Now, you can also use a craft cutter for a variety of other projects due to the accessories available. I am not too familiar with all of the blades and the tools that are out there, but I know you can do a ton of things other than just cutting vinyl. Now, for the industrial cutter, this one is going to be great for larger jobs. Of course, again, you can reverse it and do onesies and twosies. You just have to deal a little bit more with aligning using the pinch rollers, and I will go a little bit further into that later. It also has a servo motor in it, which allows for smaller and fine detail. Now, I have personally seen the cutting difference on a particular logo where it might have been a little bit more of a struggle to cut on the craft. So I popped it on the Roland and it cut absolutely no problem. Utilizes rolls and sheets pieces for the craft cutter. Now, the only thing about the pieces that you have to keep in mind is that as we go to adjust these little rollers right here, 2 rollers have to be able to grab onto a piece, where the smaller you just stick it on there. Now, your logo restrictions decrease because you have a 24-inch roll of material you can work with, where you only have a 12-inch space on your mat. So if you are one that likes to produce larger logos, you want a nice large graphic on the front, take that into consideration, because if you want to go larger than 12 inches, really 11 and a half, then I strongly urge you to go ahead and consider a larger format in terms of being able to use a certain size of material. That would also mean if you're doing like a full back and maybe you want to go 10 by 13 inches long, then just know that 13 inches is not going to work. You have more control on adjusting your specs. I find that if I need to really adjust cut settings for a certain material, I'm able to figure that out much easier and much quicker than I am with the program that I have to use for Cameo. Again, both of these types of cutters are going to help you get the job done. It just depends on what your patience is like, what your budget is like, and what your overall goal is when it comes to your business. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to talk about are the parts within the cutters. I'm going to set this down, otherwise I'm going to keep just waving it around. And both of these have a blade and a blade holder. So this is the blade holder, and this little bottom part is what pushes that blade up. So you can see, there we go. That is the blade that we are working with, and you barely want it out. So with that, Both the craft and the industrial cutter have a blade and a blade holder. The craft cutter uses a mat as you're sending your material through, where the industrial cutter does not. Now, there is a cutting strip on the industrial cutter that you will have to change occasionally. And this is what is protecting the blade from going into the equipment. So into the plastic is this cutting strip right here. And this just peels off, you order a new one and you put it right back on. Now, the other piece of the industrial cutter that you have to consider are the pinch rollers. And that is what is holding the material right here. There are 3 of them. I lied, there are 2 of them because you just need one on each side. And then these adjust depending on how big or how small your material is. Also for the industrial cutter, you will see that this is on a stand. This top part can pop off and sit on a table, but this is really nice because I am just constantly wheeling it wherever I need to go about my office. Now, like I said earlier, this also takes sheets of materials and you can go up to 24 inches in rolls. Back to the craft cutter. After we discuss the mat, you will use sheets of material. So if you have a large piece like this, then you will trim down your size and then you'll put it on your mat. Like I said, there are some craft cutters that you can utilize 12-inch rolls. I have not personally dealt with that, so I'm not going to speak on that too much. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about here in a little bit, we're going to go ahead and pause, would be programs. And there's design programs and then there's cutting programs. For the craft cutter, both Cricut and Silhouette have made it extremely convenient where you can design and then go straight to cutting within their software. There are free versions and then there are paid versions. And even if you use the free version, then you can always go in and pay for certain designs. Now, if you are looking to design outside of that platform, then you can definitely import your artwork. Each brand takes different types of files. Pings, they just need to be vectorized, and the pings, PNG files, and PDFs, what is it, SVG, and I know there's a DTX maybe, in terms of Cameo. So there's just different files that you can import to make those work. Now, free programs that you can go in and design, which I know myself and Jenna use probably religiously, is the Stahls Vinyl Designer. You can find that on stahls.com. Once you log in, there is a button that will take you directly to it. It's very, very easy to access. It's free. It's built in within the website. And then there's also CADWorks Live, and that's WORX. And that is a separate platform. It's all cloud-based, but again, it is free. And you can go in there and design. You can import your own fonts. You can get really, really creative. You can export that and then go into the Vinyl Designer. They don't talk with each other, but it's definitely easier for you to use both. Also within the design capabilities, there are places or websites like Love SVG that offers free and paid art that are cut files. They are ready to import. You could go straight to you could go straight to the Silhouette Studio, import your art there, and get going. Now, if you are going to use an industrial cutter, you will want to use a couple of different programs. Vector Cut is again a free program that can tie into CADWorks Live. And once you are done creating your art, you can go straight to the cutting software and send all of that information, and your cutter can start performing. With those, like I said, the Silhouette Studio already has the cutting parts in it. Same thing for the Cricut design space. And then of course, with GraphTech, they have their own program, and then Roland uses Cut Studio, but I still prefer Vector Cut from Stahls. Maybe that's just how I was trained, but it is so simple and so easy for me to use. Okay, so that was for the most part the PowerPoint. Like I said, I will export that for you guys and make sure that you have that at your fingertips. So what I want to do now is just show you how you would load the material into the cutter. And this is very, very simple. I'm going to do my best to get out of the way. So this is CAD cut metallic. If you watched the bags class earlier, then you guys know that I love this material. And this is a 20-inch roll. So this was a yard and I have used some of it. So now we are, I don't even know what this is, maybe a 1.5 feet, maybe almost 2 feet. So what you're going to do is go adhesive side up. For me, I know which side is adhesive side up on this. The shinier side has the carrier and the more matte side is your adhesive. So we are going to just come through the back, and then we are going to slide our material through. Bear with me, I'm stepping in front. Through to where it's just going to come through those pinch rollers. And you can hear once I slid that material through, it basically just jump started the fan. And now the cutter knows like, hey, I'm awake. I'm going to get used here in just a minute. If this was a roll, there's actually rollers behind this cutter that will house that material. And as you are constantly cutting, it is going to help feed that material through and keep it more organized. So if you are doing 10 full front logos at a time, the rollers are just going to keep sending that material through. And then once it's complete, it will go all the way to the back. Now, from here, what we want to make sure is that we are maximizing our space. I really don't want any material wasted. However, in this particular case, we could shorten our space, but I always use the roller from side to side just to kind of maximize. Now, what you can't really see, nope, not going to try to move it, is that there are little white dashes here. And this is what is giving you the mark on where your rollers should be. They should not be outside of the white dashes. So I'm just going to sit here and adjust. This always makes me feel like I am at the doctor's office and I am moving those little weights on that scale. Okay, now I know that my material isn't 100% straight, so there are lines on the cutter that allow you to kind of, align just a little bit better. So that's what I'm doing now. All right, once our pinch rollers are where we want them, as you can see, we've got one here and we've got one over here. I am flipping this handle and it's going to lock the rollers in place. From here, this is so easy to operate. The Roland is basically what I call like a click button. It's click this, you're done. The GraphTech CE 7000 is a little bit more detailed, but both are going to get the job done. I haven't personally been able to work with the 7000, but I did work with the 6000. And honestly, I don't mind either cutter. I don't feel like one is better than the other, nor is one easier to work with. For me, it was all just understanding where everything was located on what I needed so I could get the job done. I also understand my head is like somewhat cut off, so just bear with me on that. From here, once you pull that latch forward, it's going to tell you select your sheet size. It's going to say roll. It's going to give you the option of edge, and then it's going to also give you the option of piece. If we had a roll and we needed to know how much material was in that roll, this guy is going to sit there and calculate it from width all the way to length. So I am using the edge because I'm not going to be taking up this entire sheet. If I needed to know how big this sheet was, if I was going to put 3 to 4 different full front logos on there, again, the piece would measure that and tell that for me. So once I hit edge, I hit enter, and my blade was not in there, so we'll get that fixed. And it's sending the material all the way back to go ahead and mark where the front is. So let me just refix my blade there. All right, so now it's telling me I have 18.2 inches to work with. So to give you an idea, if you were doing 6 logos that were maybe 3 by 6, so 3 inches in height, you could turn them vertically and stack them all along this specific edge. Okay, from here, the most important thing that you're going to do next is make sure that your force is correct. The force is what is pushing your blade into your material, making sure that you have the best cutting specs possible. You want to make sure that your blade accurately cuts. That way it's easier to weed. And you also want to make sure that your blade doesn't go through the carrier, essentially damaging your cutting strip like I talked about originally, as well as making little letters, circles, whatever pop out of your logo, which then you can't use. Okay, so my force, all I have to do is hit this button, and it's telling me right now I am at 140 grams. I was cutting soft foam earlier. That's why we're up so high. For me, I know with this particular blade that I am using, I need to go down to, well, I say that, but I realized I was cutting fashion film. So we're going to test this together. I use the up and down arrows simply to adjust, to increase or decrease. I'm now at 90 grams, and all I have to do is hit enter. In terms of making sure that my force is good to go, that's it. Force up or down, enter, done. From here, we're going to test because, like I said, we want to make sure that we fully tested everything and we are good to go. So I'm just going to hold down test. It is going to finish. And then I'm just taking my weeding tool, coming in here. Can't do it from the side. And then I have weeded out a tiny, tiny little cross or T. And then, of course, another piece of material, and that all weeded pretty easily. Next, I always like, yeah.
Can you review a little bit more in depth about changing the blade depth based off of the heat transfer vinyl? We have a question coming in on how often you have to change it and how do you know when the blade should be what depth for what material?
Yep, for sure. I'm going to test this really quick and then we'll definitely go over that. Okay, so I always like to just check the bottom to make sure nothing's poking through, and then we are good to go. Now, because I know we're not going to take up that full 18 inches, I'm going to hit origin, and it is going to tell the cutter that this is our new starting point versus right here when we started. So this would become our new origin. So we would be working with this amount of material versus this amount of material. I'll hold that down. It blinks and says origin set. And we are all good to go to send our art to the cutter. So while Jenna mentioned force, how do you know what material goes with what force or how deep, and when you need to change the blade. So what I am going to do is actually just send this to the cutter. And too many screens.
While you're doing that, another question came in. Some folks are wondering when you should use a 45-degree blade versus a 60 for the Roland, and the 9mm versus the 1.5 for the Graphtec.
Okay, let me send. So right now I am in vector cut. As you can see, this is the art that we're using. We won't be able to go over how we import it. I just want to show you how easy it is. We would be adjusting material size just to make sure everything is correct. This says 14 inches in width, which would be what we are using for material. It says I have 15.3 inches to work with, so we are good to go. Also, if you notice, my image is completely mirrored, and that's because we want to weed with the carrier side, when we put the logo, I don't have a logo in front of me, we want to make sure it's carrier side up, which then flips that image to where it is no longer mirrored. Okay, so I'm going to send this to cutter. Okay, so in terms of force, each material has its own force, kind of like each material has its own recipe for application. You can find all of those settings online, or the recommended force, the speed. You can find that in the details section. Let me show you. I'll just go there. Now, the more you get familiar with a material and use it over and over again, you kind of start to understand how much force one is needing. And then, of course, the more you use your blade, the more you're going to have to increase your force just to go along with how the blade can get a little dull. Whoop. Sorry, I almost exited on that. Okay, so what I'm doing now is going to the website, and I will share that. It's thinking, so bear with me. Okay, so we are on Stahls.com. And I have gone to CAD Cut Metallic. And excuse me, it would be in a user guide, not details. As you scroll down, you can see that there's cutter guidelines. So this one, there was a question asking about 60-degree and 45-degree blades. This one is recommending a 45-degree blade. And as you can see, the recommended force is 60 to 90 degrees. Now, like I said, keep in mind, the more you use your blade, the more you're going to have to increase your force. And there's even been times where I have used a fresh blade out of the box, and I've actually had to go under that 60 grand. So use these as a guideline. As your blade gets a little more dull, just know you might have to increase, but that's one of the reasons that it's so important to test, because you don't want to go through a yard of material expecting that you have cut 10 different logos. That's a random number with a length. And then realize that now you have to throw away that entire yard because half of it is cut, half of it is not, and it's just not going to weed accurately. So this is a great spot. You can come to Stahls in each material section, see how to apply it, and then also see how to cut. If you go to view craft cutter settings, which is what I had mentioned earlier on, as we started going, that this would be something that I would upload. As you can see, there is the Brothers Scan and Cut, the Silhouette Cameo, and then it just keeps going down to the iCraft and the Cricut. You can also, well, at one point you could download that. So I'd have to see if it's still downloadable, but know that this is right on the stahls.com website, and then just pick whichever material you want and it will take you there. Now, in terms of blades, 45 and 60, 60 is typically used for a much thicker material. So CAD cut soft foam, CAD cut silicone. There's a twill blade. I'm not sure if reflective, color reflect takes a 60-degree blade or not. I rarely switch to a 60-degree blade, but that is simply because what I am doing is more for testing and showing you guys how to do something. So if you can get your design to work with the 45, great. Otherwise, a 60 is just going to get you a little bit better detail on those thicker materials. In terms of longevity of the blade, it really depends on how much you are using your cutter. If you're cutting for hours all day, or excuse me, for hours every day of the week, then you are going to blow through some blades much faster than somebody that's doing 20 pieces a day. You also want to make sure you're taking care of your blade. So earlier, you guys noticed that I was trying to show you exactly how far out your blade should be. And you really only want to go about the thickness of a credit card. So the higher out it is, the more of a chance that you have of chipping that blade. If that blade is chipped, you need to toss it and get a new blade. And Stahls has Stahls blades that you can use for both Graphtec and Roland. They do Stahls Roland and Stahls Graphtec, I believe. And then each cutter brand makes their own as well. Now, for the Graphtec, I cannot speak to that. Jenna, I don't know if you can or not, but if you do have more specifics on that, definitely schedule a one-on-one and get your questions answered on that. So sorry, I cannot talk enough on the Graphtec, the last two that you said. What other question? Am I missing another question, Jenna?
Nope, you've covered them. Other than that, I'm answering some more in the chat.
Cool. Okay, so I'm not weighting this, but just to show you, we got a lot of detail in this as I'm like poking my head out. And it's mirrored, so that was a smart move on my part. There is a lot of detail in this logo. You saw how quickly it went, and we also went 9.5 inches in width. I wanted to do a fairly large size just to give you an idea on the speed. Let's see. So we're going to attempt to cut on the Cameo. If you guys have other questions, make sure you're popping them in the comments. That way we can get answered. This guy is a little bit more loud than that one. So we'll just do our best to stay in touch. So I have already put the material, again, carrier side down, adhesive side up on the mat. And what I am doing now is just loading it. So in this particular cutter, this is the blade, and you buy like these. You don't buy individual blades. So they have different holders per whatever material cutting. In terms of like paper or leather, or if you're wanting to do, I'm going to butcher the word, but calligraphy, debossing. I mean, like there's so many different types of blades. All you have to do though, it's so nice and simple, is just pop that blade in there, and then you'll hear that snap and that blade is ready to go. Next, you just align from arrow to arrow. And then you hit this button and that loads the material. Now I use this sheet. This is the craft cutter settings. And as I go through the materials with my Cameo, I have gone in there and made adjustments. So as you can see, it's so important to just test. Sometimes what works for me may not work for you, and different art can change. So I strongly encourage you to just test a little bit before you start running, because you will quickly burn through some material. Okay, so let me see if I can. I'm not going to show the cut studio. I'm going to go ahead and hit send. I am using heat transfer smooth. In this particular case, I have to adjust force, speed, and my blade depth. So there are multiple settings that you have to adjust for the craft cutter versus the industrial. There are other settings you can adjust for the industrial, but most of the time you don't need to mess with those. Okay, there it goes. So as you can hear, this guy's fun. Now in terms of length to cut, it's going to take a little bit longer to cut on this cutter versus that one. Also, if we wanted to cut multiple logos at a time, this could still be cutting, while I'm going to have to completely reload that material for each individual logo. Again, both good options because they're going to get the job done. I actually enjoy using a craft cutter for onesies and twosies because all I have to do is trim that sheet, put it on there. But if I know I just need to get it done, then I love using the industrial cutter. I wish that thing had a silent button. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. If there's any questions, like I said, pop them in the comments. There's the Graph Tech, like I said, and Roland. The other thing to consider when it comes to the industrial cutter is what computer you use. Personally, I use a Mac. For work, I use a PC. So if you're using a Roland, then just keep in mind that there are going to be some that are friendly and some that are not. I'll say it that way. You might need a different type of program if you're wanting to go Roland to Mac. I know at one point you had to have the, I'm not going to say it correctly, but like the portal that will take it from Microsoft to Windows in order to use a Roland. So if you are Mac driven, GraphTech's going to be the one you want. Now, what this is doing is sending the sheet all the way back. And then once it's done, it is going to pop it all the way forward. I'll hit the down button, it will release. And then you can either weed on the mat or you can peel, put it aside, and then cut your next logo. Jenna, we good on questions?
Yeah, no questions coming in. Sharon says, thank you, Kelly. Awesome information. Everyone was really excited for this class.
Cool. Sorry, it's so loud, guys. It's like, I feel like this is the loud class.
It doesn't really come through.
What?
It doesn't really come through. I feel like your mic from your camera or your speaker or whatever, it kind of like keeps it pushed out in the background.
That's amazing. Because I feel like I'm yelling right now. Oh, there we go. Okay, so all I have to do is hit that button and this is done. So in terms of one logo, this is excellent. It's easy. I don't have to worry about putting the sheet up or the roll. Now, this was actually a tip that was given to me by one of our own, Leslie. She said, if you take the mat and put it down and peel the mat away from the material, that it peels so much easier. And I'm passing that on to you because I didn't know it, and it does make a huge difference. Okay, so I kept it correct side just so you guys could see, but this is what happens if you do not mirror. So if we were to go to put this on our garment, you would have to literally stand in front of a mirror in order to read it correctly. But which one went faster? Jenna said that it was quiet for you guys, so that's excellent. I felt like I was screaming at the top of my lungs just to communicate. Let's see.
Someone's gonna know what your thoughts are on Corel Draw versus Adobe Illustrator. I know that neither of us actually use those. Do you?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, we use like the Viny Designer and CADWorks Live and Canva.
Canva.
Yeah.
That's my designer. No, I would love
Dean would be a really good contact to talk about Corel and Adobe. He's one of the keynote speakers of the event, so definitely touch base with him. And he has a class tomorrow, correct?
He does, but I will tell you, when we did the Unleash the Color event, he did a class showing how easy it was to use a certain program. And he was so pro this program over Adobe and Corel. And I would definitely reach out to him and see what program that was, or go back and check out the Unleash the Color event videos on YouTube. I believe the majority of those are housed under the Transfer Express YouTube account, but I know he talked about art so much, and that would be a really great tool and resource. But man, I wish I could do Corel and Adobe, but I doodle. I don't draw. That's how I create. And Canva.
And Kathy was wondering how you can use CADWorks with the craft cutters as far as exporting and bringing those into the design space.
Yep. So in CADWorks for my Cameo, I export as an SVG, as a PNG, and I import into my Silhouette Studio, and then I trace. Now you have to import like per color in order to have it all communicate. I still cannot get my PDF to work, so I don't know if something didn't activate on that end. With Silhouette, what Jenna and myself were told in one of our Make and Sip series was that if you actually upgrade from the free to the next level, which I think is, it was under $5, maybe it was $5 a month, that you can actually import PDFs, and the PDFs you can export from CADWorks Live as a vector file. So that should eliminate you you having to trace them in Silhouette Studio or Cricut. And I know, Jenna, you can speak on the Cricut design space way more than what I can.
Yeah, it's very similar. You're just going to export that as a PNG, and then there isn't really a trace feature. It kind of does the vectorizing for you as you import that in, and then it's good to go.
Cool. All right, guys, we've got a couple more minutes. If there's any other questions, keep them coming. I think that's it. Am I missing anything?
I think you touched on everything. Because there's a heat transfer vinyl class tomorrow, I think they'll learn a little bit more about that then. So if anybody wants to see how artwork is created, Sarah will be doing a session on that tomorrow. And then we'll dive deep into heat transfer vinyl as well.
A lot tomorrow. Trying to think. Yeah, there is the vinyl designer, your HTV, and there is a print cut, getting started with print cut as well, if you're curious on upgrading from a cutter and expanding into going full color. I think that's it. Okay, well, if you do not see any other comments coming in or questions, excuse me, then we are going to peace out early by 2 minutes. And we will see you guys all tomorrow. First off, if you made it through this class as well as all of the others, give yourself a big giant pat on the back. If you only made it for this class because you were working, give yourself a pat on the back. And if you're going to catch up tomorrow, then you have a lot of catching up to do because there are so much education still coming at you. So from myself and Jenna, thanks guys. We'll see you tomorrow and have a wonderful night.